Hey everyone, welcome to episode 7 of the Miami Tech Pod. I'm Cesar Fernandez, and as always, I'm joined by the Miami Pod Squad, Brian Breslin, Maria Durkee, and Will Weinrob. We are recording this on a Friday. The sun is out. Our Zoom meetings are winding down, kind of. This is not the happy hour edition again of the Miami Tech Pod, so no slurry words this time.
Speak for yourself, bro.
Will's catching up a little bit. He's he sat happy hour out last week, so he's catching up. But how's everyone doing?
Amazing.
That's great, Brian. Where are you? That is not your.
So I am at the 8 Sleep Pod.
Another one.
Pod, whatever suite.
Say 8 Sleep Suite 5 times fast.
So I'm at the 8 Sleep Suite.
There you go. And your experience, good, bad?
So far, it's been really interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing how the bed adapts to me by day 2, which I've heard is like the sweet spot.
Yeah, AI. We're kicking the tires on the AI of the mattress.
Pretty much, yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's jump right in. We have a lot to talk about this week. Will, what do you have for us?
Well, we got a lot of fundraising news happening in Miami, and I'm personally really excited to see all of this activity because I think all of us on this pod know how hard it was for local startups to get funding over the past decade. And now it just seems like every day there's a new funding announcement, which is awesome to see. We got a lot of companies scaling up and going into growth mode, so that's great. The first one I think that's worth talking about, and forgive me if I pronounce this wrong, Brian, you could help me. Cesar, right?
Sixterra, yeah.
Sixterra and Appgate, and that's $1 billion SPAC led by none other than Miami tech legend Manny Medina and Medina Capital. Brian, if you want to kind of jump into the specifics of this one, because I know you've researched this a little bit.
Right. So Appgate is a cybersecurity sort of solutions provider that Sixterra, which was sort of the sequel to Terramark, spun out after sort of cobbling together a bunch of different companies and sort of growing the team once they sort of made it more efficient. This was backed by Medina Capital and VC Partners. But they've got over 360 employees now here in South Florida. And I mean, this is Manny's second unicorn, right? We need to come up with a name for someone who's breeding unicorns or something like that.
Oh, unicorn breeder. I like that.
So there you go. Yeah.
Guys, I thought we had a name for that already. Pat Riley.
Oh, there you go.
Oh,
very much. So I think this is a great move for them. They were able to. They had raised like a little over 100 million, I think, before this, and now they're at $1 billion valuation. So this is exciting to see where this goes, and what kind of impact that has on Miami.
Definitely. So that's great. Then the next one that announced funding this week was Smart Hop. Smart Hop, led by Guillermo Garcia. I've spoken with Guillermo a few times. Really smart, sharp entrepreneur. They're in the trucking logistics space. And this is notable for a few reasons. They raised a $12 million Series A that's led by Union Square Ventures out of New York City. But before a lot of these folks out of state got involved in the Series A, this was led by Las Olas VC up in Fort Lauderdale. Esteban and team led the round. So that's great to see a local VC lead the seed round and now it's scaling up into the A round and bringing in more notable investors. But also this is notable because this Series A is also joined by Ryder Ventures. Ryder Trucking is a huge corporation based in Miami. They just spun up a $50 million corporate venture fund, and Smart Hop is the first investment that they announced out of that fund. And this trend in general of corporate VC arms, like we have a few of these here in Miami, right? We got Ryder, another one with
35 Mules. Yeah.
Right. And then Ivan at
Watsco,
exactly. Watsco is another one. So this is great to see. And Smart Hop, it looks like they're doing big things and their trajectory is very, very strong. So
I'm so bullish on this space. I know a lot of very large players from Uber to
Yep.
Peloton to Convoy. There's a bunch of other companies in the space, but I think people don't realize that up until very recently, the trucking brokerage business was remarkably low tech. I mean, you had actual brokers writing on whiteboards, like actual orders and legs of shipment trips and segments and shipment trips. And it was, for the most part, a really inefficient segment of the economy, which is, everyone knows trucking is the number one job in America. And it's something that is seeing a lot of disruption, not just from the booking, right? We're going to see all of these tech companies enable trucking to be more efficient so that you have fewer empty segments going back and forth. But it's going to, that efficiency is eventually going to be passed on to consumers in either, getting goods faster or actual reducing shipping costs, and then the environmental effects of, actual fewer, inefficient miles on the road. So I think it's really popular, and it's nice to see a company building that here in Miami.
I can attest to this as someone who's built a lot of logistics software over the years. It is crazy how low tech some of these companies are, especially when you consider like how so much of what they're doing is, dependent on timeliness. You'd be amazed that companies are still using Excel spreadsheets as attachments to manage their orders. And I think so. The other company that raised a bunch of money this week, which is really interesting, was Nimbus, which raised $53 million. It's kind of crazy that we're talking about $65 million in funding, outside of this SPAC in 1 week in Miami. That used to be a whole year's worth of funding.
Yep.
Like go back 6 years, 7 years, and it was like $1 million here, $1 million there, and maybe if we were lucky by the end of the year, we hit 50 million or 60 million. Now this is a weekly thing.
Yeah. I remember when we started Live Ninja, this was 2012, people were like, you're not going to even be able to raise $500,000 here in Miami. You're going to have to go to New York for that. And now, we have these kind of rounds here happening. So it's amazing growth for sure.
And it's a cool concept too, right? I mean, they're a SaaS company that does the software backend for banks and credit unions and folks that want to get into the lending space and the fintech space. I think it's really important to have, we've seen kind of that shift in banking going a lot more virtual. There's a lot of technology that allows for that, but for the most part, again, it's one of these, benefits to the customer, because if you can kind of cut out all of the costs associated with having brick and mortar stores all over the place and, loan origination officers and these things, the actual savings is going to be passed on to the consumer in some way. I think we're starting to see this in the fintech space, where there are companies that are really celebrating the things that differentiate themselves from, no fee banking to no late fees. And they really want to be pro consumer, which is not what the traditional banking players have, let's say, been accused of over the years. So it's really nice to see that as well.
Yeah, it looks like a cool app. Like spin up your own bank. They have it labeled as banking as a service, and it looks really, really interesting. So for folks that want to check out Nimbus, check them out. That's nymbus.com. The Miami company doing really big things.
Maybe that's what Brian's up to. He's going to start his own bank.
I was told before the pod started that I was not allowed to start a Miami Tech Pod bank by certain folks on this screen. So I hate to disappoint you, Cesar.
I just said you need a federal bank charter, and you need to be have to have permission by financial regulators in states to originate loans within the states. I didn't say it was impossible.
Look, that's not saying that the Brian Bank of the Bahamas might not appear suddenly.
Triple
who
B.
knows?
Well, that's the move for sure. Yep. Maria, you starting a bank?
Cesar, you always come in with the red tape. I mean, squashing our dreams here.
Buzzkill.
Cesar, you always got to bring up these laws, Cesar. Jesus.
That's why we keep you around.
All right. Speaking of finance activity, you all see that Chamath Palihapitiya donated $250,000 to Mayor Suarez's political committee. The king of SPACs is now the king of PACs. What do we think about this? I have my take, but I want to, I think this is the first really large, check that we see from VCs and investors in essentially supporting the mayor's political efforts. And the Miami Herald wrote a little bit about the backstory, and I think got the mayor on the record speaking about the check. But what do we all think about Chamath putting his money where his mouth is?
I think it's awesome. I mean, I think this is, Chamath is a very well-respected, well-known figure in Silicon Valley, and it can't help but send good signals where you have folks that, and Chamath didn't even know the mayor personally before a month or so ago, right? This whole thing happened with the "How can I help" tweet, obviously created a bit of a whirlwind, and they connected, I believe, if I'm reading the article correctly, over a call. And it didn't take much for Chamath to, or didn't take long, I should say, for Chamath to be very, very impressed with Mayor Suarez and his efforts, so much so to cut him a check in support. So, I mean, that just sends a great signal all around, not just for Miami, but for Suarez and his future as a political leader.
Yeah, and coming from this world of politics, I mean, that is a very large check. I mean, you see mayors, raise anywhere from the $50 to $100 to maybe $10,000 and $25,000 if they get donors that are a little bit more deep pocketed. But obviously Chamath is a billionaire. He's dropping some serious cash. But I also think this sends a message that's really important. I think the thing that is going to come out of this is, for all of the other policymakers, elected officials, city council members, members of the legislature that are watching Mayor Suarez on Twitter, that are watching, his open embrace of tech companies, there's now kind of an ROI on that position. If you think about it, right? There's a little bit of a signaling that it's not just good policy to embrace entrepreneurship and tech companies here in Miami, but it's also good politics because you have these deep pocketed VCs and investors that are really wanting to support candidates with these views. And I think that kind of helps grow the chorus of voices that have .gov email addresses in terms of this movement.
So, Cesar, do you think this is going to have a sort of a broader impact on what expectations are or behavior patterns, from the tech industry and the well-heeled individuals, as far as what kind of money they're willing to put into political candidates in Florida, and what they're going to expect from it, right? Is it going to be pro-tech or is it going to be something else?
Yeah, I think that Chamath's contribution wasn't necessarily tied to direct business interests that he has in Miami or anything like that, right? I think this is a referendum on a refreshing politician in Mayor Suarez in Chamath's eyes, right? You have, for the most part, it is very rare to see a city mayor embrace technology companies and entrepreneurship at the 12 out of 10 level that Mayor Suarez has. And we'll invite him on the podcast pretty soon and we can talk about this. But as far as I know, I don't think there's any particular thing that Chamath Palihapitiya wants out of this contribution. He's just signaling that, look, we need to be supporting people like Mayor Suarez all around America. And I know that he's been involved in other political giving to candidates, political committees and campaigns and all of that to support the reelection efforts around the country. This is just kind of endorsing the refreshing approach that he's hearing out of Mayor Suarez.
So, Cesar, to play devil's advocate, is there a concern for those who might not feel comfortable with politics being in bed with the tech industry, and are they going to feel this check gives and this precedent gives tech companies kind of free rein to do whatever they want?
Yeah, it's a really good question, right? I think there's a lot of people that are weary of a lot of money in politics, right? There's a lot of people that are concerned about the influence of technology companies kind of driving the agenda. We've seen that a lot of political giving in Washington, D.C., and how tech lobbyists have been shaping the agenda. And I think that's a very valid point, right? There's going to be people that are going to be critical of this and say, look, we want you to embrace the entire idea of, technology companies being able to be built here in Miami, and we want you to be, pro entrepreneurship and all of that. But we don't necessarily want, a concentrated few with deep pockets setting the agenda, right? But I go back to, I don't get the sense that this is that, right? Chamath lives in California. He doesn't have any business before the city. This is someone who has a lot of money to spend and says, look, our leaders should look like Mayor Suarez. So I'm going to put, political support in his coffers for his reelection campaign to make sure that he survives the next, campaign and he continues to lead the city like I believe it should be led. So that's my take, but you bring up a really valid point, Maria. Like there should be some healthy dose of skepticism here on like whether this becomes a trend that becomes a little bit more transactional than this one-off contribution.
So in other news, similar news, it was just announced this morning. This airs next week, but today's Friday, as we mentioned, and it was just announced this morning that Miami OG Melissa Krinzman has been named VC in residence by Mayor Suarez and his new task force called Venture Miami. So as a big fan of Melissa, I could think of no one better for this role. She's been really active in the community for many, many years, leading Krillian Ventures. So I think this was a good pick on Suarez's part. What does everybody think about this new opportunity, this new kind of role that she's in?
I think it's great. I love Melissa. I think she's fantastic. She just has a great way about her. Not only is she whip smart, but she just has an empathy and a connection for founders and VCs. She just kind of has the balance in between both of those worlds very, very well, and she does that so great. So I have no doubt she's going to absolutely crush this role. I think it's a great time to have someone like Melissa in this place working with Mayor Suarez. As there is more and more VCs and entrepreneurs coming to town, we're going to have some kind of organization around all this to make sure people are being connected with the right people. So I think this is a great initiative. I'm really looking forward to learning more about it and learning more about the details, but I agree with you, Maria. Couldn't have been a better pick. Melissa's a rock star, so I'm looking forward to seeing where she takes this.
So on the one hand, I think it's really neat and needed for someone to be coordinating and like you mentioned, playing traffic cop here on VC funding in the ecosystem, right? I think it's important for if anyone wants to start a company that they have a very clear roadmap of like, what's step one? Who can I contact in order to try to get funding? And I think that her portfolio is going to lend to that. What would be really cool to see, though, is for the city to leverage Melissa's talents in putting together complex deals that are privately financed in order to solve public problems, right? The city, I think, kind of goes into public-private partnerships all the time where they leverage city resources, be that, land or some type of contracts, in order to work with the private sector in order to solve a problem and not finance it through the taxpayers' dollars all the time. But it would be really cool to see, Melissa start a fund dedicated to solving city problems where there's, a kind of private sector incentive and an ROI in solving these city problems like congestion or affordable housing or climate change, but with a VC at the helm. That would be next level. I don't know what you all think about that, but I hope that that's kind of what they have in mind over there.
I think there's another thing that that's interesting to me about this whole Venture Miami thing that she's part of and that Saif is leading, is that, historically it's been sort of hard for folks to navigate all the different things going on in the city. And if we have a funded team that is, compensated for their time, we don't have to rely on the volunteer efforts that we've been having for the last decade, where, it's the community builders like the, Marias of the world or the Leanne Buchanans or whoever are sort of overstretched or overtaxed, and now the fact that we have, an office dedicated to sort of facilitating all this stuff, I think is a huge first step.
It's important. Maria can only be on one clubhouse room at the time, right? Like she's stretched thin. She's like picking VCs up from the airport and like pitching them on Miami, like while on Clubhouse and dropping notes in the Telegram chat. I mean, look, she's poor Maria. Like we need
I heard a rumor that she has a couple burner phones, so she can be in multiple clubhouse rooms at the same time.
Just like a
and
DJ.
She pre-records her sound bites.
Maria, tell our listeners right now, are you hoarding Clubhouse invites?
I am. I do have some. So if you need some, let me know. No, but I think I'm really excited because both her and Saif, and I think some of the other folks that are going to be announced that are appointed to this Venture Miami task force, they're kind of, they've been at this for a while. They know the players. I think they'll be great stewards and they'll really make sure that government is involved and kind of knows about the folks that have been building here for a while. And it's not just kind of like shiny object syndrome with the new folks, but making sure that the folks that have been on the ground are kind of involved in this next chapter of high growth in Miami.
Yeah. And I think the other thing I hope this is an actual cultural shift for Miami government and not something that's just kind of the pet project of Mayor Suarez, right? He's running for re-election. He's going to be there for 4 years. But then we'll have a new mayor in the city of Miami. And we've seen some of these kind of initiatives that the city says this is important. We're going to put resources behind, span several administrations. And I think that by plugging in the Melissas and Saifs of the world, you create that longevity that should, allow this to span more, further than just the 8 years that, Suarez can be in office in the mayor's position.
Totally agree.
So Maria, what do you want to highlight this week? I know there's a lot of activity out in the community here. I'll kick it over to you because I think you have a couple of companies that you want to highlight that are hiring, right?
Yeah, so I'm sure I'm going to forget a ton. So feel free to tweet at the Miami Tech Pod and we can mention it in a future episode. But just highlighting some of the companies that are really growing their teams here. So for some of the kind of the OG Miami companies, Reef Technology, one of our most recent unicorns, is hiring tons of folks. I checked the website. It's 145 roles in Miami across all kinds of departments. And then Papa, which is one we've been kind of watching closely and are doing incredible things. They are hiring 13 roles. And although it says it can be remote, I was listening to Andrew last night on a Clubhouse call that said they really prioritize Miami talent, which was really great to hear. Another great company, Secbaris in cybersecurity, they're hiring 3 roles across engineers and designers. Milo Credit, 9 roles, also engineers, product managers, designers, biz dev. And then BrainStation, which, we had Joe and Yuha on the pod last week. They purchased WinCode. They're actively hiring 9 roles, which we'll be actually highlighting in this upcoming week's email newsletter for Refresh. Blackstone, 32 roles, all kinds of roles available there. And SwagUp. So one of our newest folks on the block, they're hiring 12 roles, including a head of talent, product managers, a senior manager of e-commerce. So it's great to see a lot of these companies, both new folks and folks that have been building here for a while, kind of growing their teams in Miami. I think it'll be great opportunities for local talent here.
That's really awesome. Can we go back to Reef hiring 145 people right now? That's open roles. I work with a company, so I know this, but Will, you've hired a lot of people. How hard is it to hire 145 people at a time?
I can only imagine. I mean, we were at a much smaller scale, so we actually were able to interview people. Like I was actually able to interview all the people that I hired. When you get Reef scale, you really need systems in place. And I think what Michael's doing at SwagUp is really smart. He's got a role for head of talent, somebody dedicated specifically internally to finding the best talent and hiring them. So that's great. I can only imagine once you reach that scale and you got 140 open positions, what the internal issues and the logistics you have to juggle to make that happen. But hey, that's a great problem to have, and we should see more companies on that note. So that's awesome to see Reef. It's awesome to see Blackstone. It's awesome to see BrainStation with just numbers of jobs openings for anybody. So any of our listeners that's looking for a new gig, Maria just highlighted some great ones. So check them out.
That's an interesting skill that I think would be awesome if we could figure out how do we sort of transfer that knowledge between companies of how do you scale and how do you hire fast and well, because it's easy to hire fast and bad, but hiring fast and well is it's a tough skill. And like some of the hyper growth companies like the Ubers of the world and Lyfts and all that other stuff, like there's that talent. There are HR teams that know how to do this stuff. And, I think that's something that at some point would be useful for the local teams here in Miami to learn that. Or, and I don't know if the solution is just hiring away people from those hyper growth companies in HR and then telling them like, replicate what you did before, but.
Yeah, I know Brian and I, we've discussed it would be cool if there was like a head of talent for South Florida where they would help companies kind of navigate that. And from some of the conversations I've had previously, the folks that have been most successful in hiring, let's say, kind of recent grads have been the ones that have been on the ground at the universities. But a lot of the startups either don't have the bandwidth or don't realize that it takes kind of that more hands-on effort to keep some of these new grads. So if there was someone kind of hand-holding them, kind of explaining to them how you can successfully hire from undergrads and graduate schools and even some of these coding schools, I think that would be really interesting.
See, this is another thing that Venture Miami should take on, right? If you think about the power of that, if you're bringing a resident VC in and you're starting to think like a tech company in government, how powerful would it be to have essentially a head of the recruiting arm within government that does not operate on the margins of recruiting firms, that just operates completely break even on their salary and is simply incentivized to get more residents into these high paid jobs, right? We hear a lot of government officials go out there and saying, their priority is to create jobs and pass policies that allow the private sector to create jobs. But to my knowledge, we've never had an actual recruiting function insourced into government where they're saying, we're going to help tech companies or we're going to help startups scale by actually putting qualified engineers and developers and marketing professionals in front of you. I mean, that would be super powerful and something we need to talk with, the mayor and Taif and Melissa about for sure. All right, great. What else do we got? Any last parting words before we wrap up here?
I want to talk about Clubhouse in general because this application has just taken not just Miami Tech, but the world by storm. I think the tech scene by storm. People are spending hours in it a day. Maria, you are doing a fantastic job being a Miami ambassador in Clubhouse. I always see you in rooms just talking with folks that have questions about Miami and the activity there is just off the charts. I want to get your feedback on Clubhouse now that you've spent so much time in the app. What do you think about the experience? Do you think it's here to stay? Is it going to be a new major social network of the likes of like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram? Or do you think it's a fad? I'd love to get your take on it because I know that you're really utilizing it at the moment.
It'll be interesting, especially once we can go back to a lot of in-person things. If people will still be as attached to their phones. I have liked it as a audio-only app, especially with all the Zoom drain. I like that I can be in my pajamas and kind of be involved, and I don't have to kind of make sure I have all the setup. I can just kind of be hanging out on the couch. So yeah, I've really liked it. I'm a fan. I can see how addicting it can get.
Yeah, I mean, $1 billion valuation less than a year after launch from Andreessen Horowitz and folks like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, on stages there. It really is incredible. Brian, what do you think of Clubhouse?
I mean, I think it's interesting. I'm not as into it or as addicted to it as Maria is. I think none of us are. I think Maria's found her new virtual home. But I do have a funny Clubhouse story. I was I overheard my wife's conference call this morning with her. She's a lawyer and the rest of her legal team, and they were all asking for Clubhouse invites. And to me, that was a sign of this is mainstream and it has jumped the shark.
Well, they can't get it because Maria's hoarding them all.
Tell Julia to let me know. I'll add her. But apparently, I missed. Everybody over on Twitter was talking about how there was a shoot your shot room by New York women that were basically having tech guys try to like hit on them. Somebody had to explain to me the whole shoot your shot thing, where apparently like you say your best pickup line and then they judge you for it. But people were up till very late last night listening to that, and I missed out. So I'm definitely started following some of those ladies so that I can listen in because it sounds hilarious.
Yeah, I have a Clubhouse plug. It is not related to shoot your shot rooms at all. But on Friday, this Friday, the 19th at 4 p.m. Eastern, a bunch of former Uber Miami operators and operators in Uber in a bunch of different markets are going to talk about the behind the scenes tales of scaling that business, what it was like, the craziest moments, all of that. So join for sure. I'll be, I guess, on stage. This is my first time hosting on Clubhouse, but I definitely think it's going to be some valuable insights because this is just a great group of people, and it's some behind the scenes stories that you don't hear in the media or in the books and all of that. It's going to be really hopefully it's going to be really impactful for those that can relate to the chaos of building a fast growing company.
When is it again?
It is Friday the 19th at 4 p.m.
So did you guys see that Mark Zuckerberg made a surprise cameo on someone's Clubhouse room the other day? So the question I have for you three is over under on how soon the Clubhouse interface and all that is ripped off and is included in the main Facebook app.
Well, it's already happening, and it was already reported that Facebook is working on a competitor. So that news already broke. They have an internal team working on it, and yeah, I think that I'm bullish on Clubhouse as future as a platform, but I also think this will be very much like Stories. How Stories started off on one platform and then incorporated into everything. Now it's in LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, whatever. I think live audio rooms are just going to be a feature within applications, very much like Twitter. I don't know if you guys see it in your app yet, but sometimes I open the app and where the stories section is on the top, they have it's circled in purple and it's like pulsating, and you could just go in and it's basically Clubhouse embedded into Twitter.
They call it Spaces.
Spaces, correct. And it's actually really well done, honestly. And for me, I actually, as a user, prefer it if all my stuff is in one app. If I see like Brian and Maria live on Twitter, that's kind of easier. And then I think that leads to also very good discovery of new people to follow on Twitter. And I do think that this is as a product person, I think it's very impactful, this just method of communicating, because in our ADD driven society where there's hundreds of things to look at on a feed, like, on Twitter and Facebook, et cetera, Clubhouse really makes you focus on one thing, which is the conversation. So if like Maria's talking, and let's say I didn't know Maria, I'm much more likely to tap on her avatar, see who she is, follow her, engage with her. You really get a sense for who the human being is on the other side. And I think that that's very powerful from a just building audience perspective. I do see now that it is starting to unfortunately fade into some scammy stuff. Like I see like the get rich quick, show us how you make $1 million in less than a month rooms. So we obviously have to figure out how to cut that out of the platform, or at least make people more aware that that's not good stuff to listen to. But I'm pretty bullish on the medium in general.
I saw on Twitter that Jason Calacanis said he got suspended on Clubhouse because he called out the multi-level marketing scammers, right. And Clubhouse like freaked out about it or something. But
I like that. He should be calling them out. Those things are dangerous. And because the medium is so powerful, like I was just saying, it's a double-edged sword. It's one thing to get an MLM Facebook ad that I could just scroll past. But if I'm in there listening to someone who's most likely very persuasive and I didn't know any better, all of a sudden they might be able to get $5,000 out of somebody, and I think that could be dangerous. So I applaud Jason for calling them out. Those are shady practices.
Do we think that Clubhouse gets sold to a bigger social media company? My bet is Snap.
Ooh, interesting.
Ooh, yeah. And Snap's stock price has been on a tear lately. So
Interesting. I mean, it's such a coin flip. They really could build their own graph and their own and this Clubhouse is interesting because this is the first platform I've really seen where the VC that led the round, Andreessen Horowitz, is really one of the ones that is the reason of the growth of the platform because of these private conversations of Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz, and then also one of the guys that just led the Elon Musk chat, and I think the show is called Good Times I forget, it's Sunday night or whatever. He also just joined as a partner. So you have the whole Andreessen Horowitz literally leading these rooms and these conversations with high net worth, very influential people. So that's interesting. So the M&A strategy of that, I think, will be very interesting to see, considering who you have on the board and the lead investor, and they're actually creating the content on the platform. You might see the investors being a little bit more adverse to an earlier acquisition than normal if this was a normal play. But yeah, that's a good question.
What's it valued at?
$1 billion was the latest valuation.
That was fast.
Yeah.
How much
10
money?
months, I think it was.
How much money do they make?
Negative.
$0.
Smart. that all checks out.
I heard they have one single engineer. I don't know if that's rumor or if it's true.
I think that's not true anymore.
Probably not anymore, but I would imagine that because this started off, I was about to say Pete Davidson. His name's not Pete Davidson. It's something Davidson. The CEO of Clubhouse was a entrepreneur in residence at a venture capital firm. I think it might have been Andreessen Horowitz, but it might have been another one. He previously started a company called Highlight, which was like this, you would basically, if I was close to a friend, it would notify me like, hey, Brian's, a mile away if you want to link up, that kind of thing, which didn't go anywhere, raised some funding, but then he became an entrepreneur in residence. And I think they hacked together this app. So I think you might have been right, Maria, to start. It was probably an easy app to kind of prove the MVP, get it going. There's a lot of open source audio tools that you can use to get this app off the ground. But yeah, probably the first thing they did with that money was hire a bunch of back-end engineers to get the scaling right.
All right, we gotta wrap, but this is fascinating. I think we need to keep this going on other episodes. Highlight some additional Clubhouse craziness. We are going to be watching, and who knows, maybe do a little Miami Tech Pod Clubhouse room in the near future here. So thank you all for listening to episode 7 of the Miami Tech Pod. If you haven't already, please rate and subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app, and visit us on Twitter at Miami Tech Pod. See you next week.